As many of you know, I love to read. And recently I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks because I find it very comfortable. I can put the headphones on at night and fall asleep and then back it up the next morning and listen to it again until it absorbs into me. But I love books. And my very dear friend, Janus Adams, who I've known for so many years, we'll talk about how long that was. She and I talk a lot, and she's one of my heroes because not only is she a writer and an educator, she's also a historian. So we're clicking together on lots of different levels. And when I thought about doing a conversation about books and reading, Janice is the first person I thought of. As a matter of fact, even before recording this program this morning, I was having breakfast, and an old friend of mine who is also a book lover, my friend Billy, he and I were talking about what can we do to celebrate books and reading among our people. And it re-energized me again, knowing that I'm going to have this conversation with Janice. So welcome, Janus Adams. Thank you for being with me this morning. Let's get going.
Thank you, Matt, for having me.
Janice, before we get into some of the things you've written and you are currently remarketing, I want to just talk about the environment that we're living in, where books about our people are being threatened and being banned. That's a contemporary topic. I don't think it's going to go away soon. Can you give me your thoughts about what is happening in America with regard to protecting or attacking books about our people and our experiences?
You know, years ago, I learned that in pursuit of one of my books and audios for children, I was in Cajun country and doing this research. And I learned that the Cajuns were actually called, quote, white niggers. Awful term, all right? And it taught me then a lesson about racism, which is to the point of what you're saying. Racism, this kind of attack on Black people, attack on our history and culture, attack on our books, attack on our young people of excellence, hence the AP courses that were attacked, the advanced placement courses, that was attack on the aspirations and excellence of our young people. Racism is not about the people who are the targets of it. Racism is about the needs and inadequacy of the person who projects it. And I'd never thought of that before. So when you ask me about what all of this is about, I have to say it's about those people who are so in trouble with their own needs, with their own problems, with their own sense of, I didn't achieve in life what I want to achieve in life, that my only way to lift myself up is by putting someone else down. That's what we're experiencing in the United States today. From the African American point of view, from women, from LGBTQ youth, from transgender youth who find themselves under attack. Why? In the name of somebody else's religion. We're finding this. All of that religion stuff, frankly, is an excuse. It is what we have is people who cannot sing a better song, who cannot offer a better story. They are looking for a way to lift themselves up, and they can only find it in putting someone else down. And that is what we're going through now. So we who are being targeted by this, we have an obligation, I think, to really nurture and protect our own spirits, to validate each other, to love each other forward. That's our responsibility right now.
You know, when our former president, Barack Obama, was in office, one of the things that I really looked forward to each year as the year wound down was his reading list.
Yes.
And I loved watching him go shopping with his daughters and publishing the list of what he was into, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you, Janice, what are you into right now? Who are you reading? What's in your book bag?
Oh my goodness, what's in my book bag? I have just gotten a book that's obviously been out for a while, but I had never read it. Toni Morrison was a dear friend and mentor of mine. And it's an anthology on self-regard. And I'm trying to remember the exact title of it, but that's what the anthology is. So that's on my list. Also on my list is, honestly, I'm rereading some of my own histories that I've written, and I'm rereading them because I those were written as an essay per day, and we can talk about that more, but the inspiration of our history fueling us on a day-to-day basis, I find that I am in need of it. And sometimes I say, okay, physician, heal thyself. And the healing thyself is to really remind myself of that every day, what we have done.
You said something that really grabbed me. You talked about an essay per day. Can you
Mhm.
expand on that a little bit? Is that a technique that you follow, writing an essay per day?
Well, for the books, and one of which is over my shoulder, Sister Days, I had decided that I wanted to write a book of African American history. And the issue was, well, how to make it accessible, how to make it useful, how to make it something that can fuel us. And so I decided to write it as an essay per day form. I had been reading, I do write pretty much, I write a lot. I find it to be a muscle that I have to keep exercising. And that's how you keep it going. I read a lot. I listen a lot, like you. I love audiobooks. I also go to bed at night with audiobooks to relax my eyes and relax my spirit and challenge me, but not too much to challenge so that I don't fall asleep. And and though honestly, the books that have been on my audiobook reading list are an interesting series. I have been reading a series of mystery books by
Ah,
a Canadian author, Louise Penny, who
yes.
is now up to book, I think, 18 it
Yeah.
is that she has written. And I find them fascinating. And I'll say why quickly, because they are more why done it than who done it.
Mhm.
Yes, it has the mystery format, um, but the why done it part and the excellence of her writing, her craft, she is right on the mark in terms of how you craft a book. Her sentences, she's exquisite. But there's also another part of that. Why mysteries? When I was really retraining myself to write a longer book, as opposed to the essay per day form, to write more chapters than one pagers, I remembered a statement by Claire Booth Luce
Mhm.
that the problem with history is that it's just one damn thing after another. And, and I said, okay, I need to write history in a way that is not that. And so I began to turn to mysteries because it's plot, 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 story, drive you forward, ask the question, answer the question, raise the next question, but always to keep you engaged. And that's
So,
how I got hooked on reading mysteries.
well, let's jump from reading mysteries and plot to the way you constructed your series of backpack books for young
Oh,
people.
that's what I was referring to with the Cajun Country book.
Okay.
you know, that series came about also from the need. There was a wonderful critic who said Janus Adams's books, because of the essay per day, Janus Adams's books are vitamins for the soul. I find myself having to take vitamins for my soul each and every day to counteract the attacks and the poison that is being projected. That story is the root of backpacks, and a long story, but why I decided that I would use my skills, the demands on me as a mother, but my skills as a journalist to go on location, to meet with real people in real places and say, I don't want this for my children. I don't want my children inducted into racism this way. How do you share with your children to make them feel good about themselves, to know themselves, not just feel good about themselves, but to know themselves? How do you do that? And I asked that, the very first place I went to ask that, true to the story, was with the Tonawanda Seneca people of upstate New York,
Mhm.
because this had happened to an indigenous boy, a native, he's actually Mohawk, but I was able to have the Tonawanda Seneca Nation welcome me for that. Then we went to Cajun country, which I just mentioned, and I went because I had heard that they were called white niggers, and I thought there was a lesson to be learned there. The people were so grateful that I had come down. They took me out with the shrimpers into the Gulf of Mexico. They brought me into homes, and each time they made gumbo, it was hotter than the last batch, but they were so happy to welcome me. They couldn't believe that a woman, they said, this woman from Connecticut, she came came down to talk to us, and they could not believe that she is putting us on the radio, and that was what I did. So you find people maligned by all of this.
Janice, I know that there are some things going on currently in your life with regard to books and reading and writing. But before we get to that next part, I wanted to ask you, um, as I look for heroes that reflect me, um, in American literature or world literature, there aren't that many that look like me, that were written, you know, back far enough, within not within the last 50 years, let's say. As a writer, um, assuming that some people may want to write an essay a day and shape a heroic character that might be in their family, what are the
Mhm.
elements that they need to bring to light to show a light on that heroism? What are the things that make a good literary hero?
I think what makes a good literary hero is truth. So that's the first thing, that you want to really look at the truth, uh, tell the true story. We, but what also makes a hero, period, is the way they relate to others. There is a story about the formation of the geese, and how the geese always fly together in the same direction. And at a certain point, with the wind beating on the leader, that leader flies to the back and takes his position, and another leader emerges. So a good leader has to also be a good follower. And you look for that person's connection with others, not just standing out in front and saying who I am, but who we are, and I am in service and at one with what we need. When you are structuring a good story dramatically, we structure our stories by starting with what's called a mitigating incident, something that propels that person to do something in that moment that is important and strong. And then, but that will also have resonance and be iconic and symbolic of the story that is to follow. So, whether in a brief story, writing a brief story, or a a volume, you want to lead with that mitigating incident. You mentioned heroes. I'll tell you a mitigating incident that has absolutely shaped my life. But it's also the story of the leader who reaches out in service to others. And it is because as an 8-year-old, I was brought into the process of becoming a northern elementary school desegregation pioneer. By 10, I was introduced to Dr. King, who was then, we forget how young Dr. King really was when he is anointed by E.D. Nixon to say, you're going to lead this. E.D. Nixon of the the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, who were our, you know, to some people, they were porters. To us in the community, these were the men who got to get out, see the world, go beyond. And so they were very revered. Plus, they created the first African-American union. And so when he, as a member of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, taps this young man who has just come to Montgomery to be the leader, because Rosa Parks has just said, absolutely not one more time. And once again, speaking of heroes and sheroes, why does she keep her seat that day? She says, not the nonsense of propaganda that we've heard, which goes back to why we look for our truth and we share our truths. She does not say my feet were tired. That's nonsense. What she says is, I thought of Emmett and I could not give in. Emmett Till, the 14-year-old boy who had just been lynched months before. That's why she says she is keeping her seat. Why my family put me into that school desegregate, or allowed me to be brought into that school desegregation process, I now know. I did not know at the time. And it wasn't until after my grandmother's death and going through her papers that I found out. The very day the very day and hour when Mrs. Parks is going to court to defend herself against her arrest for violating segregation's rule, at that very same hour, my grandmother is in federal court in New York, pledging allegiance to a flag that is promising them her freedoms that will be denied both women. In fact, my grandparents pledged their only 2 grandchildren, my cousin, Ted Landsmark, who has later significance for his work, but unfortunate significance from a racist attack on him in Boston. He and I were 2 of the 4 children who desegregated New York City's elementary schools, leading the way for the North. Because of that, when Dr. King, this young man, at that point probably 28, 29 years old, comes to New York and is speaking at the Riverside Church, we are introduced to him for that reason. And Dr. King does something to me. He literally says, so what? Obviously, someone has primed him as to why he's meeting these children. But he says, and what are you doing for our people? And I say, well, I'm very shy. And I say, well, I'm helping with the schools. And he tells me that what I am doing is, he says that you are pretty. So he's validating a little girl spirit. And he says that what you're doing is important for our people. And then he decides to ask me to make a promise, a kind of a pact, just between he and I. And the pact that he asks is, he says, if I would like you to keep doing what you're doing, study hard, do well in school, keep doing this so that no other child will have to go through what you're going through now. And he says that if you keep doing what you're doing for other children, I will keep doing what I am doing for our people.
Yes.
And he makes that bargain with me. So in that story, you can hear, yes, the leader who reaches out and understands. He is also a follower. He is a follower at that point of Edie Nixon and Rosa Parks. But you can also hear when I say what I'm doing in creating the series for children, you can hear the why for that, for my own children and for today's children. And you can also hear the 8-year-old, then 10-year-old little girl whose validation is so important because that moment really affirmed and changed my life. I was still shy, but it allowed me to go back to school the next day with a new sense of relevance and meaning beyond myself
Yeah.
that allowed me to go through some things no child should have to go through. And the fact that we have children being put through it today by people all over again, I
Mhm.
don't say Dr. King lied to me. I say America lied to me. And my job is to reach out and help us help our children today get through this.
I'm going to change gear just a little bit. I want to talk about some of the recent, very recent, um, new exposure that you've gained as a result of social media. You're kind of
Yeah,
in a rocket ship that's taking off, going very, very fast. And I'm
going
fascinated
very,
by that. I want you,
I am, I'm sorry, Matt.
I want you to talk about that in a moment, but I also want you to weave in your reflections or speculation how social media might positively impact other Black writers as well with exposure. What are your thoughts about all of that?
You know, in truth, it's difficult to answer that because I've been posting on social media for years. Prior to the incident that happened this week, my average Instagram post might be a couple hundred responses.
Explain what happened this week. Take me to that.
This week, all right, look at what's happening to our children now. I posted a video of a story about what happened to me as a 16-year-old freshman in college when a calculus professor, furious that his best student was a Black girl, decided to humiliate and intimidate me by publicly announcing to the rest of the class that I was cheating. That was the only way that I could succeed in his class in calculus, is if I was cheating. And therefore, he was going to stand over my shoulder for the rest of the semester for every exam to watch me to make sure that I was not cheating. When my grades plummeted from an unsatisfactory to him A plus to a C minus, then he was satisfied and he no longer stood over my shoulder. 20, more than 20 years later, I would say maybe because it's about 10 years ago that I was in Greenwich, Connecticut, driving down Greenwich Avenue, and when literally in the middle of the street, I could not drive, and blurted out of my mouth was, "You couldn't have been so bad. You had to know which lesser student to cheat the right answer from." I had no idea that for all that time that had been within me. I was not thinking about it on a daily basis, but that is how deep that was, that it just came out. And I told that story on this little reel
Mhm.
on Instagram. As of now, over 300,000 people have responded to that reel, and the number is still going up. I'm in absolute shock about it. I'm grateful for the 16-year-old who is now being validated, because at that point, yes, my family tried to soothe that wound. There's no question about that. But frankly, that story, he thought it would change my life for the worst. I was in that calculus class because I had the dream of, now we call them hidden figures, thanks to the movie.
Yeah.
I wanted to join the space effort, and I had always been strong in math. He said, "Oh, no, you won't." Had he not done that, I don't think I would be here talking about my books and my histories and everything else. Maybe I'd be talking about something mathematical, but I wouldn't be having this conversation with you about all of this. So he thought he was changing my life for the worst. He thought he was stopping me. He thought he was saving humanity from a Black girl exceeding. Instead, he propelled me into a different discipline where I belonged. Um, and I ended up graduating with a degree in theater as a playwright and as a director. That too came in. What we learn is the positive things we learn are never lost. That became part of the backpack series you asked me about for children.
So going forward, um, how might the recent experience, I'm going to call great success, with Instagram, shape your messaging going forward in terms of becoming known on particular issues or promoting the work that you write?
Mhm.
How will that work for you?
Well, I just want to go back to answer your question in a very definite way, therefore, from before, the question that you asked about how might this help other writers.
Mhm.
And I told the background of it so that people would know, because the point is, you do the work and you never know when the luck is going to hit.
Mhm.
It's not the first time that I've done a reel, or that I've spoken out. It's not. But this one hit, I think it was timely. We are, as a people, we are going through tremendous assault. What is happening in the Middle East, forget the Middle East, what is happening in Israel and Palestine
Mhm.
is in the forefront of everyone's minds. Absolutely, people relate to the Holocaust, and believe me, Black people relate. Enslavement in this country was 246 years. We certainly relate to the Holocaust of the 1940s and that destruction of people. We
Yeah.
relate to that. We relate to what happened to those people. That's why, you know, that's there. But what's being done is wrong. There is a genocide that is going on before our eyes. We have to be
Yes.
honest about that.
Yes.
And so I think that, and when we say never again, we have to mean for everybody,
Thank you.
not just for us. And so I think that what people are seeing right now is also impacting, because as we see this as an indigenous population, we see this akin to what happened here with indigenous Americas. We see this akin to what happened in South America. We see this akin to what happened when Europeans went in and decimated the African continent and created the triangular slave trade that brought people here. We see this in that context. And historically, when the United States finds itself in trouble, it throws people of color under the bus. And that is a pattern that we are seeing and feeling. And I am not trying to be overly dramatic. I am not trying to be Incendiary because we know more than anybody else the need for our healing. We need to be soothed. We need to be comforted. But we also are facing this as reality, and we're feeling it every day, what this means. And so this video that I posted just struck a chord and a nerve. And you cannot plan for that. I've been writing about our history for years. I've been a journalist for 50 years. You cannot plan for it. I am grateful in that earlier conversation that my video was of service, because I think that's what it was. It resonated deeply. It was in service. It tapped into something that people were feeling deeply and had a way to say, in this level, me too. On these terms, me too. What do I do now? And so to the point of writers, this is writers as human beings. This is writers reflecting what we go through each and every day. And our work is a reflection of the people who've nurtured and nourished us. It's a reflection of the shoulders on which we stand. It's a reflection of the world in which we live. That's what that post was about. Going forward, I am inviting people to join me for a live Q&A that will be an event in which we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about how we heal ourselves, how we nurture ourselves. What do we tell our children? And whenever I'm asked that question, what do we tell our children? I say what we tell our children begins by what we tell ourselves. I have also been very privileged for the past years to return to journalism in a way that I never thought at this stage, by hosting my own show and podcast. And you know that show very well as the founding co-executive producer of it. And through that show, we get to discuss contemporary issues about the theme, race and courage.
Yes.
And that is race, every race, and courage. And this is a time where we are going to need integrity and courage big time. And so I get to keep doing that show as well. And I get to keep writing and reading my own books. Toni Morrison says she wrote the book she wrote because those were the stories she needed to read. So I guess since she was mentor and friend, that I have written the stories I and hopefully others need to read.
Indeed. Janus, the next time you come back, the next time we talk on camera, I'm hoping you can bring both of your daughters with you, because I'd like to find out from them what it's like growing up in a house with a mom who's a writer, who's a historian, who's a reporter, and surrounded by books. I want to hear their story along with you. So
I will tell you very quickly one of the stories that they tell so that other people can stay tuned. If you ask them what it was like to be the daughters of a mother who began this children's publishing company for them, they will tell you. It happened many years later, but they will tell you that when they wanted to go on spring break with their friends, I said, no, we are going to follow the routes of the Underground Railroad. And I actually took them out of class to do so. And they traveled with my crew and me, following the routes of the Underground Railroad. Away from me, they will tell you it was the best thing that they ever did. With me, they will keep saying, and we wanted to be with our friends, and she took us to meet Harriet Tubman's great-grandniece. What is that? So,
okay.
I'm sure they will have a lot to say.
Dr. Janus Adams, author, historian, communicator, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt Mixon, journalist, producer par excellence. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll do this again.
Let's get together.